Greetings everyone. Thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Black Witch Dirah and we're doing something a little bit different today. So this is the first time I've done something like this on my channel. I've been involved in other podcasts and things like that on other channels, but this is my first time doing something with a guest on my channel. So really, really exciting, completely different topic to what we usually cover. So yeah, this is Nora. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you for the very generous introduction, and it's my honor for sure to be your first guest. And I believe that, such choices are always of significance. So I hope that this pays off well for you and your path.
Thank you, and thank you so much for joining me today. It's taken a few weeks for us to organize this, but we got here. So yeah, before we get started, I'm just going to mention a few new things that we've got coming up. So I have recently written kind of like a short ebook on necromancy, because this is what we've been covering in the Dark Arts Academy this month. We've been looking at baneful magic and necromancy, and I've made some of that content. The book that I've written, it's not really a book, it's a very short ebook kind of pamphlet thing. So that's available to purchase on the website if that piques your interest. And our Dark Arts Academy will be reopening soon, inviting in new members, and we will be announcing the theme for the following month. And as for Nora, I'm going to post all of her links in the description for her Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc., so that you can go and check her out. Anyway, so into today's topic. So the reason I decided I wanted to, and I was really nervous about the idea of doing this, because it's not something I usually do. And so what happened was Nora messaged me about some content that she had made that was of a similar nature to some other content that I'd been involved in. I'm not going to get into that subject now, but it was about another kind of internet famous black magician that's gained a lot of notoriety. So yeah, we kind of delved into each other's content and found a few differences of opinion on a couple of things, and I thought it'd be really interesting to discuss this, because and what I see a lot on social media, like I find myself a very opinionated person, and I express that a lot and online, and a repeating comment that I get is, "You're not a real witch if you think that." And
Oh
nothing
my God.
Nothing pisses me off more than that. It's like, what? I'm not allowed my own autonomy. I'm not allowed to think for myself. Like, what fucking spiritual system am I in here? Um, so yeah, I get this comment a lot. So I just thought this video would be a great demonstration of two people with similar kind of spiritual belief systems, following the same kind of, on the left-hand path, who have, probably views of opposition on a topic. And so yeah, that was kind of my motivation for doing this video. But into the actual topic. The topic today is addiction and recovery. So I saw Nora's video on, do you want to explain a little bit about the video in question on your YouTube?
Well, I made a controversial point, or like my co-host did, and I promoted this this content, wherein, like, we're of the opinion that groups such as Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, they basically don't work because they're based in a flawed belief or philosophy.
Mm,
And actually the whole mental health system, even the secular part of it, is um and it's kind of a taboo to bring this up,
mm,
but a lot of the things that we engage in, be it political ideologies or like self-help, psychology, medicine, it's not actually like based in science. It's all faith-based. And what I see is a lot of blind faith and people
mm,
just giving up their own power to some kind of structure, some kind of authority that they foolishly trust themselves into. I guess, seeking liberation or empowerment or just some kind of good outcome,
Mm.
because that's what people come for to these groups, but they don't get it. Instead, what happens, what I see way too often is, and I actually have an ex-boyfriend, ex-fiance even, who's been involved in the AA for 15 years. And he keeps relapsing like every couple of months. And it only dawned on me like later on when observing his story that it's like a fake religion that very much mirrors Christianity, where like you're a sinner, you're flawed, you confess this weakness, you can't help yourself, you gotta give it over to the higher power. And then you start attending these meetings and it becomes like church, and it becomes like, forgive me the profanity, it's like masturbation. It's like short-term gratification makes you feel good, and then you go back into the same. I was raised Catholic, so I kind of see those motives everywhere in society. It's still very much based in that Christian ethos. So all these people, they just engage in these church meetings and holding hands, and then go back to being a sinner, then go back to confessing, receiving the sacrament. And the whole point of freeing yourself from the hold of addiction is lost. Like you basically, in the best case scenario, you replace one crutch with another crutch, and it's even encouraged. Like in the alcoholic groups, they always give out a lot of candy and like chocolate because it's what calms people down. And sugar, mind you, is the biggest addiction out there that is like entirely legalized, extremely profitable. It goes back to the sugarcane industry and slavery, actually. So, like, and alcohol is full of sugar additives these days. It's not even actual alcohol, like it's made out of extracts, and then, ethanol is added on top of it, and then all these like flavors, a lot of sugar in it. So they keep these people like placated or sedated just by, giving them another substance that is socially acceptable. That is actually the most widespread um, type of addiction there. That's the only substance that I was actually ever like really badly addicted to that was like refined sugar. It was fucking up my body and my mind for many years. And it took Lucifer himself to come down and incarnate in one of my exes to really show it to me and like discipline me into changing my diet. And like I was in hell for 2 weeks. Like my intestines were on fire
Mm.
because the inflammation in my body was so bad, and it took me years to even find some article by some doctor who put it together that this is a real thing. You can be addicted to sugar while at the same time being allergic to it. So it's like you're in a constant state of craving, satisfying that craving, but when you do that, the inflammation in your body worsens. And this goes on unrecognized, in the population every day. So I don't claim to be any kind of expert. I've just made some shocking observations that made me, you know, wake up from what we are taught and what we are shown. And from what I've seen, these self-help groups, they mimic what churches do a lot. And they end people up in the same sort of bondage and virtue signaling, and like nothing gets solved basically.
Interesting. I mean, it's funny because I agree with certain things that you've said here. Like if you go to an NA meeting, the majority of the time there's gonna be biscuits, there's gonna be cookies, and everyone's drinking tea and everything. Like, it's very kind of typical for once you put the drugs down, you're gonna pick other things up. That is just the kind of nature
And
of
I've seen it,
addiction.
I've seen it with my I think all of my exes were addicts, so I'm kind of an expert by proxy, unfortunately.
Mm.
And the other one, he had an issue with pornography, which was actually sabotaging our sex life because, you know, it gave him what he needed, and he didn't like have a whole lot of initiative, and that was bad for our relationship. That's what caused its demise, actually. And we even went to therapy for it. But the thing is, what I witnessed, and like other people have told me the same, is once he made the decision to stop porn, he got into video games really heavily. And those are not even like chemical substances, those are behavioral addictions, but it's all based in the same dopamine
Mm.
short circuit. So it was like, okay, well, you know, we have banished the demon by the devil. That's a saying in my native tongue. Like you drive out a nail by another nail, and here you go, banishing the devil by uh another. And that's a lot of what I see around, or even like people going from the so-called hard drugs to like the soft drugs, or that which is not persecuted anymore or legalized.
Mm.
And I'm kind of guilty of it myself, you know, because I'm a cannabis user. And I've seen this, like the mental gymnastics that we as people go through to like prove to ourselves that we are better, you know, like we're better than the meth heads, we're
Mm.
potheads, like, you know, there's always like so many ways you can rationalize it away. And that's the basis of addiction, you know. And I went deep enough in that, like I was like stoned all the time, every day. And then you observe these changes in yourself. I was fortunate to be able to observe it because it was my like first time. You start lying about it to yourself. You start lying about it to others. You stop caring about everything else. You start organizing your life around it. And your will to live, you know, your drive, it just kind of starts dissipating from
Mm.
you.
Yeah, it's a very it's another kind of typical thing you get in the rooms as well, is this whole thing. It's just like you'll have someone who struggles with their addiction to cannabis, and then next to them there's someone who's like a hardcore heroin addict of like 20 years, and it's kind of like, well, at least I'm not as bad as them. There's this kind of like hierarchy of like what drugs.
And that's a very churchy, very freaking Christian way to do this whole virtue signaling and, you know, competing about who is more virtuous. That's exactly what I was seeing as a kid in the Catholic Church. And it, as silly as it is, I mean, we were kids, so we learned everything by imitation. We just didn't know any better. But like, I remember that us Catholic girls, we would compete against one another in like who appears most virtuous. Like we would go and compare each other's dresses, like, and who dresses most modestly. And then we would like talk trash about those who, like, you know, had a shorter sleeve, or they didn't appear to be in pious contemplation for as long as the others. Like, how stupid is that? You know, like,
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that that kind of way of thinking and the way of like comparing, because in a kind of something that's often said in meetings is look for the similarities between you and not the differences, in the sense like you are no better or no worse than, just because you smoke weed doesn't make you any better than the heroin addict, kind of thing. Like that whole kind of superiority and inferiority complex, and that comparison comes from one's own ego. It's not actually a principle of something that happens in meetings. It's what happens within the personalities in the meeting, but it isn't part of the kind of structure and how a meeting is like supposed to be. And in terms of like a church environment, there's no kind of, you use the word sinner, that I thought was interesting. And the thing is that there's no denying, there's absolutely no denying that 12 Steps is influenced by Christianity. It came about in 1938 by Bill W. It was influenced by the Oxford Group. who were a Christian group, right? But the thing is, 1938, we're in 2023 now. There's been a lot of room for adaptation. New editions of the literature have been released. We're on our like sixth edition now. They're even looking at, in terms of like where we're at in society today, they're even looking at language for it to be more inclusive in terms of like sexuality and gender and things like that. And if you read the big book that was written in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was written in 1938, they use certain terms in there that aren't politically correct today. So my point is yes, it came from there, but these things, they have a way of adapting. And the way in which I see it adapting in terms of like, if we go back to 1938, yeah, it might have been seen as more like you're a sinner, you're a bad person kind of thing. But how I see it today in my own recovery and in the meetings I go to, it's more a case of like, where is your behavior rooted? Where did it come from? What beliefs do you have about yourself? In terms of like, because for me, the way everyone seems to have a different theory about where their addiction came from, and my own theory is basically a kind of huge trauma response. Like, I had things happen to me as a child. I didn't know how to deal with them. I never felt safe. I I turned to an all manner of addictions, and addiction isn't just about drugs. My first addiction was an eating disorder. I was anorexic and I was very, very unwell. And then after that, I kind of turned to drugs. And then, I fell into this kind of like sex and love addiction thing and codependency and,
Oh,
you
that is also real. Thanks for
know,
bringing it up. Like codependency
yeah.
is an addiction to like love or
Mm,
having someone, that whole dynamic, and it oftentimes supplements the other addictions because codependency was originally coined as a term for the wives of alcoholics and the
mm.
typical behavior that was described with them. But there doesn't even need to be alcohol, it's just like sabotaging behavior.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, for me, it's like addiction was never about the drugs. For me, it's like a trauma response. I can't cope with life, so I need something to make myself feel okay. And everyone has a kind of different theory about where
and
it came from,
and
but
that's like the point that I was trying to make, is that yes, life is hard. We all seek ways how to make it more bearable for us. But the answer is not in drugs or the pleasure seeking or, any of those crutches. It's in facing the harshness of life. That's the true left-hand path. And that's what I feel is missing in the whole recovery um, narrative. And it also paints people as victims. Like bad things happened to me as a child, therefore I was victimized.
mm,
But what if this is simply the nature of this world? What if it has always been like that? Then you're not a victim. And when you take reincarnation into the picture, then there is no bad guys and good guys. Like you were a victim once, but you were the perpetrator before. So
mm,
why even base your personal story around that? I just feel like it's keeping people stuck basically in almost like a matrix, like a fake paradigm that obscures the ultimate truth from them. And I also don't even think that like being an addict or using something is necessarily wrong, because the original left-hand path of India, it embraces a lot of very taboo practices. The left-hand path is the path of breaking the social taboos. So, like that's where we should venture forth into. But like I guess few have the audacity to go there.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I totally get that about breaking taboos, but the thing is that in the sense that the manner in which I use drugs, it was going to kill me. It wasn't like I feel like as someone who has abused their body and abused drugs, I've lost my privilege to be able to use them in any kind of other way that involves
And
monoamine.
that's a great observation. I think we definitely lose privileges when we keep making wrong decisions. Like our personal liberty is taken from us in some way, and you have observed this happen in you. So like you are looking to dig yourself out from that ring of hell where you lost a part of your free will to it. I think that's a great quest to be on. I just don't think that those groups are gonna help with that a whole lot. I don't think any group or any institution can do that. The way that the herd mentality works and institutions of men, they will always become oppressive and obscure the truth. And it doesn't matter if it's a church, if it's a school, if it's a therapy meeting, that's just the nature of human ignorance. That's why I'm no longer a part of any organized spiritual group anymore, because I've seen all the corruption that goes on in there, and I realized that the goals of the individual never align with the goals of the group. The group will always seek group cohesion at the expense of the individual. But
So,
being the lone wolf, it's hard.
yeah, the thing I have about being alone is that the disease of addiction is very isolating. And what they've found through their, psychological research of addiction is that the opposite of addiction is connection. And what I managed to get from meetings was identification, because I felt like I was, a bad person being an addict. I felt out of control. I felt like, I was hurting everyone around me and I felt like I couldn't stop doing it. I was killing myself. And yeah, obviously I had absolutely no self-esteem and I thought I was just a terrible person. But then hearing other people saying that, like, I've done that too, and that I'm not the only fucking crazy person in
But the thing
the
is,
world.
it's false self-identification, in my opinion, because like here you are with all these people trying to convince themselves that they are not a bad person. But what if you are a bad person and you're just like using each other, to puff each other's back? Like that's not facing your darkness.
Well,
The
that brings me
the
on
way I see
to,
it, like I'm a bad person, I revel in it. A Satanist is supposed to be evil. I'm a black magician. I don't need to become good. I don't need to be accepted by anyone. And my connection is not to humans, it's to the spirits themselves.
mm, it's not about being a good person. So if we look at the actual 12-step format, I don't know if you've looked at, like, have you
Yeah,
read?
I know it almost by heart. I've
Yeah.
had numerous boyfriends go through it, and they
Yeah.
have tried to adapt it to their occult beliefs.
Mm. So if we look at step 4 and 5, which is taking a personal moral inventory of basically our resentments, fears, abuse, guilt, shame, relationships, sex conduct, right? And we look at all of that and then we identify our part in it and we become responsible for that part in it and accountable and, right, this is what I need to change. I want to stop repeating these patterns. And then you move on to your step 6, which is your defects of character. So in my own work, I identify that my defects of character are playing the victim. I've identified as a victim for a long time.
That's a great observation for sure. And you're up against the whole culture because playing the victim card has become immensely popular in
Mm,
America only recently. It used to be a taboo, it used to be looked down upon. It was a culture that admires success and being self-made. But for
mm,
some reason, it has just turned into this um, competition of who is more disadvantaged.
mm. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's a really good observation. But yeah, what I'm getting at is that it's like I'm seeing all of these kind of shadow aspects of myself, and it's more rather than it being so dualistic, like what's good and what's bad, it's more like what's not helping me. Because, you know, something like anger could be considered as a bad thing within someone, but I can find my anger very it's something I can utilize. I can find that the supposed negative emotions within myself as if we talk about like spiritual alchemy, it's like I can kind of alchemize it into something not good but useful.
And
And
you should, because all the traditional vices are natural to human character, even to the natural kingdom.
yeah,
Of like we are part animals. We are driven by the similar instincts, and the point of inner alchemy is to, work through that shadow and
mm,
find some kind of reconciliation with the self, which is the alchemical wedding.
mm. So for me, like steps 4 to 7 have been a huge kind of shadow work process for me, because I've looked at all the shit that I've been carrying that's not helpful. I've looked at my patterns of my behavior. I'm looking at certain aspects of my character that are probably pulling me back into these patterns. And trying to essentially alchemize that. And this leads me back to the kind of like, the 12 steps adapting into modern society. It's coming up to what, like 75 years old now. It's going to adapt, and it's actually become a thing where the way each person does their steps, they actually have a lot more autonomy in that than they used to. And even in the sense of like this whole concept of God, right? As soon as you mention the word God, people freak out. Most people, like I'm speaking from someone that lives in the UK. Most people who sit in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting have an aversion to the idea of a Christian God. They don't like it. Out of the
Yeah,
hundreds of people,
Europe is very secular. The American groups are more outwardly Christian based.
I can
I have
imagine.
seen people who have like flat out tried to like replace kind of the word God with something else, like Lucifer or the goddess or universe or the source. There is even the Satanic Temple, I think, here runs groups, recovery groups, which
Mm.
like try to de-Christianize the 12 steps and make it uh satanic, I guess.
Yeah, I've been to a group in London, which I can't remember exactly what it was called. I think it was called something like Heathens or something, and like,
Yeah, Heathens Anonymous. Yeah, they definitely do have their own versions for it.
yeah. So yeah, it's become like very adapted in modern times. And out of the hundreds of people I know in Narcotics Anonymous, I know two devout Christians, and like it's just, and
That
everyone
that
looks at
doesn't
them
that
like
doesn't
they're weird.
surprise me. UK is very atheist. I hail
Mm,
from Czech Republic, which just like Eastern Germany is like among the most atheist places in the world.
mm,
It's kind of different in the United States, where people here, I would say, are like more religious or spiritual in every way. They're more superstitious. They believe in like ghosts and Bigfoot and Yeti and conspiracies.
mm. Yeah, I think it's interesting the contrast between what 12 steps is probably like in the UK to what it's like in the US, because obviously during like COVID lockdowns and stuff, we had our meetings went online, and I had a kind of thing where I didn't want to do American meetings because I just didn't really like the vibe of them. So I'm kind of wondering, say I was to live in the States for like a few months or a year or something, how would my attitude to 12 steps group potentially change
Well,
if
if you lived in a foreign country long enough and really exposed yourself to the foreign element, everything about you would change.
mm,
I've become an immigrant, a traveler actually 2 years ago, and it changed everything about me, this dark pilgrimage. It's a
mm,
great way to upset yourself from all mental patterns and routines that you didn't even know you had them. But it's a very radical step that, of course, not everybody will be in a position to take or even have an interest.
Yeah. So I also just want to add a little side note in here that if anyone who is watching is familiar with 12 steps and the 12 traditions, our tradition 12 states that anonymity is the spiritual principle of all our traditions, meaning that you are not meant to break the anonymity of other people. But I am breaking my own anonymity as a Narcotics Anonymous member, and I am totally okay with doing that. I am comfortable speaking about addiction. I'm comfortable about speaking about my story and about my experiences. What was the other thing I was going to add? I literally just had it on the top of my head and it just went. Oh yeah, that was it. So when it comes to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, I'm not for 1 minute sitting here and saying that is what saved my life, got me clean.
What do you think saved your life and got you clean?
What do I think saved my life and got me clean? It's interesting because I think that it all just got to a point where I couldn't anymore. I did start, like, I went to meetings when I'd kind of had enough, and I struggled to kind of get clean for the first 6 weeks. I kept going, like, relapsing every weekend or so, and then there was this one day where I just fucking had enough, and I could feel, the infernal gods that I was working with, Lucifer, Belial, Astaroth. I could feel them watching me just, fall like into a complete demise and just become just so broken. And then I decided to go to meetings on a daily basis. I decided to take the suggestions. I got a sponsor and I started doing the steps. And I incorporated my idea of a higher power, which were the infernal gods and spirits that I worked with, into that, and took the principles of my own spiritual path into that. And that's where the kind of autonomy comes into it. I didn't have, my recovery is different to every single other person's, and every single person's recovery is different because, their concept of God is different. That the reason I'm saying is that it wasn't solely meetings that got me clean is because I needed a lot of tools. I needed to feel some connection because I was extremely isolated. I was isolated in my using. I was in a very abusive relationship. And
that's an illusion, the illusion of isolation, because we all are one. We are all interconnected in the mystical sense. So feeling lonely or isolated, it's always just like us putting that lid on us. That's not how things actually are. Sometimes it takes, some LSD to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I needed various things to help me stay clean. I had to become willing. First of all, I had to become willing to actually get clean and not just be like,
and nobody can do that for you, and we
no.
can't do that for anybody else. If the will is not there, it's just playing games. You can't force anybody. I mean, some people might be swayed by the threat of losing their relationship or their job or their reputation, but for the most part, I don't think that like blackmail or putting pressure on addicts works. It can be even done with magic. Sometimes me and my partner, we were approached by like the loved ones of addicts, parents, spouses usually, and we did a heavy binding on them. But the thing is, they still have free will. And if
Mm,
they still need to go to the bottom, that's where they're gonna go. So we have seen people. I did this binding, a voodoo doll for this man who was a friend, and his girlfriend was, she just became nuts, like a pothead, like a really destructive kind, a bum, you know. She wasn't working. She was always demanding his attention, his money. So of course we told him, look, you gotta take the weed from her and don't buy her anymore. Like, just don't. And that was, of course, the proper course of action from him. But then she started drinking and became violent, like literally throwing, the big, heavy beer mugs after him in public in front of other people. So we saw people go from bad choices to worse choices when magical coercion was put on them.
yeah.
It's and it's the same kind of like with dieting or weight loss. That's another type of spell or type of addiction that people often want to be helped with. But if you're not willing to actually go through the pain of that withdrawal, the spell is not gonna help. The spell is gonna make you hella uncomfortable. Weird things happening with your body, metabolism changes, strange circumstances realigning. So it generally doesn't work trying to push anyone. But you can ask to be pushed for yourself.
Mm.
But
Ask for
sadly,
willingness. You can
you know,
ask for help me to be willing.
yeah, sure. Or you can make a pact. I have seen people make like self-bindings, take oaths, blood
Mm.
oaths, and I have seen them go down. My ex-fiance made a deal with Belial to get off of Kratom. He basically said, I will get off of Kratom. I will not be using in the next, whatever, 6 or 12 months. And if I do, like, you're free to fuck me up. He did it like an ordeal. And I was fucking scared because I knew how this was gonna end.
Wow.
And of course, he's been like between homeless and losing jobs and succumbing to severe paranoia because he brought this ordeal upon himself. And sadly, I don't even think that he realizes by now, a year and a half has passed, that he had made an oath. And that's why his life keeps going to shit,
Mm.
because they take up those oaths seriously. So
Mm.
they just, make the pressure more intense. So I'm glad that I'm not with him. I couldn't be in that situation together. I actually left that relationship with the help of Belial.
Mm.
Like I literally
Interesting.
took
So
all my
did
stuff
I.
and I flew coast to coast to people whom I have never met because like I wanted out like so badly. I couldn't stay there. So yeah, I think he already relapsed at that time, and that's why Belial just like took me and shipped me away.
Mm. Wow. That's so interesting that he made that oath. I think
He
that,
he did. He did. And like he knew exactly how serious it was. But I'm utterly convinced that he has since forgotten about it. And he doesn't realize where is all this devastation in life coming from. He thinks or he rationalizes away using again because his life got so hard. But I think it's the other way. It's because he somehow started using, and then this curse, this divine wrath, started ruining his life.
hmm, would you say that that is a demonstration of his own, let's use a 12-step term here. Would you say that that is a demonstration of powerlessness? The fact that he made
I
this
I
commitment.
I would say that it's neglect or cowardice when we like forget the oaths and the pacts that we've made. And I've done it myself numerous times. it's silly. It's like you kind of think that if you push it away, or if if you create some other mental scheme, that you'll be better off. But what you end up is creating a terrible situation for yourself. I think it's a show of cowardice or like negligence, and it looks so innocent. It's like so tempting to go that way. My own life was like fucked up to the rock bottom because I failed my pacts. But I only saw it after I had been on that rock bottom for a couple of months. That's when I really started talking to Lucifer, and we started hashing it out. And he was pretty wrathful, and he showed me, look, you tried to screw me over, so I pulled the plug on your life. That's what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. What I find interesting about that kind of anecdote there is that he made such a serious commitment, and even that couldn't keep him clean. And
Because if you can't go through it, then not even hell itself, the entire hell, can force you. You have free will. And nothing
exactly, it's
stands
that
between
whole
a man and their
willingness.
free will.
If you don't really want it, then nothing's gonna be able to give it to you. Like, and you asked me what did get me clean. It was my willingness. And it was my willingness to actually put my ego aside for a minute and maybe kind of take suggestions on from other people, or actually listen instead of just following this kind of reckless, impulsive chain of just self-destruction.
And
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 actually,
that's totally in alignment with the old theology. You said you put your ego aside. The ring of pride is said to be the deepest one in
mm,
hell. And that's where you're just full of yourself and you don't listen. And you go on and on making those poor choices. So it's when you start to listen,
yeah,
when you wake up from it, is when the change happens. But everybody wakes up at their own pace.
yeah, for sure. And I remember in the video on your channel, it said it spoke of the high rate of relapse in 12-step fellowships, and why does this happen? And it leads me to question whether this is something. Is it a case of, if we go with the narrative of the video, that the doctrine is incompatible with human nature, or is it a case of the willingness isn't there? The willingness to change, the willingness to go through pain? Because 12-step fellowships do not offer a life without pain. They do not offer this kind of magical, like, rainbow land of everything's going to be okay as once you get clean. It's not like that. Something mentioned very often is life on life's terms. Shit happens, death happens, breakups happen, you lose your job, you lose your house, you get sick. All of this is life on life's terms, right? No one is exempt from bad shit happening to them. Um, and it's a case of like,
Can you bear it, right? Can you face it without the crutch? That's the
exactly.
basic question.
Can
And
you get through it clean?
that's the biggest question of human life, I think, is can you actually face life?
Mm.
So, like, when it comes to me, maybe the doctrine is not flawed, maybe human nature is flawed, as we all know it is.
Yeah, I mean, we're never meant to be perfect. That's another one of my defects as well. Trying to be fucking perfect at everything, right? Holding myself to an idealistic standard of perfection, and holding others to that as well. And it's basically just revealing all of like what my illusions are. Um,
I had a very weird experience with like seeking that perfection. So I went to a beauty salon actually here in Eugene, Oregon. And so I wanted like some scars fixed. And this beautician, I think she became possessed by Ashtaroth, because what came out of her was totally out of place and it didn't make any sense. Like, she was supposed to sell me their procedures, right? Like, I asked for it. Like, I wanted the pitch, basically, and the discount. And instead, she starts describing to me how all these procedures are so fucking painful that she couldn't go through it, and like how it burns for days and weeks, and like she sounds like reveling in this like sadism, and like, why, what? And then she tells me, upon inspecting my face, that she doesn't see those scars. They're not there, but that there's like something else that I don't see. And I'm like, is this like a supernatural encounter? Is she like trying to tell me that basically my reality is subjective, that like my scars don't exist, but if I accept her opinion, then like we can treat something else that I don't see, and if I go for it, I'll just be in fucking pain and spend a lot of money. So I left that place very shaken, and I think that was a literal encounter with some demon, and I think it was Ashtaroth, because I kind of see her as the patron of beauticians or cosmetics. I don't know why she decided to like give me this lesson and like prevent me from wasting my money, but definitely, you know, they are here and sometimes they show themselves to us, and when they do, we better listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, yeah, for real. That's really interesting and quite incredible, actually. Do you know, I'm quite pleasantly surprised by how much our kind of ideologies have somewhat aligned in this discussion. It's definitely not as kind of like oppositional as I thought. Um, and I think maybe because from hearing someone that is part of a 12-step fellowship, which incorporates kind of left-hand path philosophy into their recovery, I don't know, maybe it's that, but yeah, I don't
I
know.
think I think it's because you're open to seeking answers, and I always honor that. Everybody who comes to me seeking knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, and I think something that's really important um in terms of uh a discussion of a topic where different opinions are present is acceptance and tolerance and allowing space for completely different point of views, which seems to be there seems to be such an intolerance to that in like today's society. Like, you're not
The
allowed to
witchy
think different.
inquisition.
Yeah, you're not allowed to think a certain way, otherwise it comes across as like this personal attack and it's really offensive and everything's about you kind of thing. um there's not a lot, you know, you see this a lot in politics where there's just absolutely no tolerance for any kind of like opposition, and people are so set in their beliefs and just not willing to hear anyone else out, which is something that I find difficult to observe today, and kind of relate to that. I don't understand how you can't acknowledge just, you know, even the fundamental kind of universal law of polarity, that one thing can't exist without the other. And um you know, there's always like how necessary opposites are and how necessary balance is, and how creation can't take place if destruction hasn't cleared the path for it, kind of thing, you know. I'm going on off on a bit of a tangent, but I don't know, this is just a theme I find in kind of like modern day debates or discussions. It's like it always comes across as personal attacks, highly emotional, highly reactive,
And
and
you know, we're doing it to ourselves, because the nature of this game is not competitive. I had a clairvoyant dream about it a few months ago, where I like saw myself underground in some place that resembled hell, and it was all about this game. But I didn't know what the nature of the game was, and I was so pissed. Like, everybody knows what they're doing. Explain me the rules, somebody. And nobody did, but I kind of picked up on it as I observed what's going on. And what I saw is that the nature of the game is you fill in a puzzle. It's a search, a quest for knowledge. And it was recreational, basically. You went from one place to another, learning from these, what appeared to be the dark goddess herself, filling in this, crosswords puzzle that everybody got, handed out, kind of like what we did as Girl Scouts, these games. But then I saw that, like, yeah, you can challenge other players into a competition, you can fight them, or you can create some kind of clique, some kind of group, but it's not necessary. The game, the quest for knowledge, is a non-competitive
Mm.
pursuit. And I don't think that I think it hinders our progress when we engage in witch wars, um, debates, even arguing. I loved it when I was younger. Oh my God, I would like talk so much shit and like write inflammatory posts. And it actually, what's weird, like, it made me extremely popular because I think I was like expressing this need for others. Like, people want to have their shit poster. They want somebody to express, their own secret thoughts, or anger, maybe something that they are not audacious enough to do, to pick a fight. I loved picking fights, always with somebody that I knew I could defeat. But it's stupid. Like, what do you get out of humiliating some other witch online?
Mm.
You know, like, how does that benefit your growth?
Yeah.
Okay, like, I've seen people disgraced so much that they left social media, like they kind of disappeared. So yeah, like, you won the paper kingdom of social media influence. Like, you are somebody in your own eyes. But like, what if those people are actually living lives which are, way more satisfying? You don't know that, and you will never know because you will never see their fake social media, Instagram glamorous persona. And I think that's something to ponder for the
Mm.
witch community.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, we've talked recently on our Dark Arts Academy about cursing culture and how
Oh, it's
uh
so pervasive.
mm, yeah, how yeah, I don't know what everyone, sorry, I'm just getting a call. I don't know what everyone thinks, I don't know what the fuck everyone thinks they're doing by like just going around and like basically throwing shit at each other. And like you're really sitting there thinking that you have the support of of the demons and the infernal that you're working with. You're going, oh, like, um saying, oh, I worked with Belial and to fuck you up kind of thing. And I'm just like, oh, please. Like, where?
Well, everybody gets what they deserve at the end.
Yeah,
You
no,
might
this
be
is so
given what appears to be like an easy win, or a quick win. And some people are so vain that that's what they settle for. The true treasure is
true.
only there for those who seek it. And vanity and vengefulness is a big problem and has always been among magicians, black and white magicians, which is it's always been out there, even decades ago, centuries ago. When you look at these memoirs of the old occultists, from 100 years ago, that's exactly what they complain about: all this backstabbing, all
Mm.
this drama, all this nepotism, this fake competition. But the nature of the game is not competitive. I saw it in a dream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like I've learnt so much from you today, so thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add to? the topic of today or our
I
discussion?
just said it. The nature of the game is not competitive. So, you know, I wish you great luck with your channel.
Conclusion.
And if anyone wants to hear more Anima Noira talking shit, then look up Anima Noira.
Yeah, as I said, I'll post all of the links in the description. And
Thank you.
yeah, I think we'll leave it there today for today. Thank you so much. This has been great. I've really enjoyed this. And yeah, maybe we can think of some other topics to discuss at some point. And
Sure.
it's been awesome talking to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you so much to everyone else for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, go and check out Anima Noira's channel. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.